A senior Pyongyang government official spent decades bowing to portraits, reciting loyalty, oaths, and executing orders without question because in North Korea, doubt is a death sentence. Then one day, a single word vanished from a ceremony, and he couldn't unsee what it revealed: a regime so afraid of its own ideology that it was quietly erasing it. This is the story of a man who spent a lifetime inside the system and finally chose to live outside it. Join us in standing up for human rights. Subscribe to hear more stories of freedom. I worked for a central government agency in Pyongyang. My rank wasn't low, but that didn't mean my life was particularly comfortable. In North Korea, whether you're a senior official or an ordinary citizen, you still have to drag yourself through each day just to survive. Up before dawn, pressing your uniform until it was stiff and sharp, reporting to the building entrance for roll call at the appointed hour. Miss it, and it goes on your organizational record. No matter how bitter the morning air, you moved fast. Some of you probably remember those days, punching in right on time at the factory or the office, watching the clock, knowing your name was being written down if you were even a minute late. North Korea is the same. The difference is it never ends, not for your whole life. The building where I worked stood in the heart of Pyongyang. Portraits of President Kim Il-sung and General Kim Jong-il hung side by side along the corridor walls. Every morning we bowed before them. After years of doing it, your body just moves on its own. It wasn't devotion. It was habit, like making your bed before breakfast. Your hands do it before your mind catches up. To anyone visiting from outside the capital, Pyongyang's mornings must have looked impressively orderly. Wide roads, clean buildings, people dressed with care. There was a time I felt proud of that. A time I genuinely believed this country was working the way it was supposed to. That year, Constitution Day came around again. Constitution Day, it's the anniversary of when the Democratic People's Republic of Korea adopted its first constitution. Think of it like South Korea's Constitution Day, and you'll get the idea. Every year, agencies held commemoration ceremonies. The flag raised, a loyalty oath recited, the legitimacy of the system reaffirmed. I'd attended more of these than I could count. I walked into the hall expecting nothing I hadn't seen before. The atmosphere was exactly as always. Officials seated in rows, a banner stretched across the front wall, the squeal of a microphone being tested, chairs scraping the floor, revolutionary music filtering in from somewhere. The MC stepped up and cleared his throat. On the occasion of the founding anniversary of the Constitution of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, something stopped me cold. Something was missing. For decades, I'd heard the same phrase, the Socialist Constitution of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Those three syllables, socialist, were always there. Since the Constitution was first drafted in 1972, that had been its official name. In textbooks, in official documents, in every ceremonial reading, those words had always been part of it. But the MC had just read it without them. At first, I thought I'd misheard. Maybe I was tired. Maybe my ears weren't working right. But the ceremony ended and those words never came. Not in the banner, not in the oath, not in a single word the MC spoke. I checked carefully with my own eyes. There was no mistake. The Socialist Constitution had simply become the Constitution. As I stood to leave, I glanced at the colleagues around me. No one looked unsettled. Or rather, no one was letting themselves look unsettled. That's North Korea. The sharper your instincts, the better you are at seeing nothing. I said nothing either. Walking out of the building, I turned the question over quietly in my mind. Why was that word removed? That single question began circling inside me, and it never really stopped. After that day, I started watching. In North Korea, when something changes, you can't ask why outright. You wait for those above you to explain. Or you figure it out yourself by reading the room. And that, the change without explanation, is the most dangerous signal of all. It means something big is shifting beneath the surface. Days passed. Meetings came and went. Study sessions, reports, routine ceremonies. Not once did anyone explain the change in the Constitution's name. No memo. No directive. Not a single line. It was as if that word had never existed, and everything just kept moving, smooth and unbothered. I went to the agency's document storage and pulled old files. There it was, in black and white, Socialist Constitution. What had changed wasn't the paper. The word had vanished from people's mouths. Printed on old documents, it was still there, but spoken aloud, it was gone. That strange, suspended state kept on. Some of you might remember back in the day, when a powerful figure fell from grace. His name would quietly disappear from the history books, textbooks reprinted, faces erased from photographs, the record corrected. The person became someone who had never existed. In North Korea, the same thing happens to words, to ideologies. One day, without warning, a word becomes unspeakable. You may learn why later or never. I sought out a senior colleague carefully. He'd been in the system for decades. A man who had survived by knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. I didn't ask directly, that would have been dangerous. I came at it sideways. The materials in the lectures lately. The references to the Constitution seem a little different. He looked at me for a moment. Then in a low voice, "Something has changed, but it's not your concern." That was a warning. Don't dig further. I pulled back. On the outside, at least. But inside, something had already caught fire. Why no explanation? Why is everyone pretending not to notice? Those two questions are dangerous in North Korea. Once you start asking them, they don't let go. The first thing this system taught me over decades of living inside it was not to ask questions. A loyal official follows orders from above and executes them even without understanding. Doubt leads to ideological suspicion. Ideological suspicion leads to personal destruction. You don't learn this in a classroom. You learn it by watching what happens around you. After you've seen a few people simply disappear from your organization, everyone goes quiet. But this time was different. That trained silence it wasn't holding. The same thought kept returning. Why this word, of all words? The most important word this country had used for decades to describe itself. A word pressed into the national flag, into the Constitution, into children's textbooks. Why was it quietly disappearing? Was the system changing? Was the direction shifting? Or was there something else entirely? That night I couldn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling of my narrow room, turning over the meaning of that single missing word, and the certainty that it was no accident. It was hardening, slowly, into something I could no longer push away. Here was the irony, though. The word was gone. But the reality it described hadn't gone anywhere. If anything, it had gotten stronger. You know what? Jangmadang are the street markets. Think of them like the old-fashioned open-air markets back home, where people sell and trade directly. In North Korea, the Jangmadang emerged after the famine of the 1990s. The arduous march, they called it. When the state couldn't deliver rations, people built their own markets to survive. At first, it was illegal, but so many people depended on them that the authorities eventually looked the other way. What I noticed was this right around the time socialist vanished from the Constitution. The crackdowns on the Jangmadang were getting tighter. Grain sales restricted again, more strictly than before. Directives on civilian control came down more frequently. The words were softening. The grip was tightening. They went in opposite directions. The portraits of Marx and Lenin still hung on the walls. Study materials still talked about revolutionary principles and class struggle. The word socialist had been dropped from the Constitution's name, but the system that word described was running as hard as ever. Harder, even. At first, I was confused. Was this a signal of change? Was reform in the air? But as time passed, I began to understand. The direction hadn't changed. What was changing was the packaging, what name to put on it, how to present it to the world. Something was being moved to the front of the stage. Something more important, in their view, than the ideology itself. I found the clue in the agency's study sessions. The topics were slowly shifting. Where once the curriculum centered on Marxist-Leninist theory, one name was beginning to crowd everything else out, upholding the revolutionary thought of the esteemed supreme leader. The first time I saw that phrase, I read past it without much thought. But the next month, it was there again, and the month after. The frequency was increasing, and this was happening at exactly the same time. A word was disappearing from the Constitution. An ideology was being stripped from the system's name, and a single person's name was moving in to fill the space. I tried to trace that current quietly, alone, lying in my bunk at the agency dormitory after checking that no one was nearby, organizing my thoughts in silence. A country held together not by ideology, but by a single name. What did that mean? And why? Now, why was this shift beginning at this particular moment? The answer wouldn't come cleanly, but the feeling that something enormous was moving just below the surface, that wouldn't leave me. Some of you have felt it in your own lives. The changes you can't see are always larger than the ones you can. That was the first time I'd ever felt that way about the system itself. And with each thing I witnessed afterward, That feeling grew sharper. The next morning, I went to work. I stepped off the bus and walked into the building. Something was different, though. I couldn't have said exactly what. The building was the same. The people were the same. The corridor was the same. But the air had changed. People were quieter than usual. When they exchanged morning greetings, their eyes didn't linger. A quick nod, then straight to their desks. Lunchtime came. Normally, people would cluster in small groups, eating and talking nothing important, just the small things. What was on TV last night? Which apartment block's rations were late again? That kind of thing. But that day, people ate fast and went back to their seats. Some stepped outside alone, stood there for a moment, then came back in. No one had agreed to do this. It just happened. That afternoon, a political study session was called without warning. The whole department assembled in the meeting room. The lecturer walked in and stood at the blackboard without a word. He picked up the chalk and wrote slowly, one character at a time. Defend the supreme leader with our lives. Then he turned around and began to explain. Defend it means to stake your life, uphold to surround and protect. The threats against the supreme leader grow more severe each day. Hostile forces at home and abroad are working to destabilize our system. We must be more vigilant than at any previous moment in our history. Loyalty is not something you keep in your heart. You show it. With your body, with your actions. It went on for over an hour. I sat facing forward and nodded. Managed my expression. Managed my eyes. Not too fast, not too slow. 20 years in that chair had trained my body to do it automatically. But behind my eyes, images from the night before kept surfacing, overlapping with the lecturer's voice. When it ended, a colleague fell into step beside me in the corridor. His voice was low and fast. Did you see the film last night? It wasn't a question. It was a confirmation. I said I did. He said nothing more. Neither did I. We walked side by side in silence. No words were needed. We both knew we'd felt the same thing. And we both knew it couldn't be said out loud. Over the following days, the streets changed too. Security vehicles, noticeably more of them. More people standing at intersections who didn't look like they were going anywhere. State security agents by their look. On-the-spot phone checks started happening more often on the sidewalks. None of this was new exactly, but the intensity had jumped sharply. People being stopped and pulled aside happened more than it ever had before. One evening, my wife said something. The woman next door told me she's scared lately. She didn't say of what. She didn't need to. My wife had just nodded when she heard it too. That was how you lived in this country. You understood what frightened people without asking them to name it. You knew why without making them explain. And you carried it all behind a face that looked like nothing was wrong. Loyalty had long been obligatory, but now that was no longer enough. You had to perform it daily, visibly, continuously, to avoid suspicion, to avoid being summoned, to make it to the next morning's roll call without incident. Loyalty had become a condition of survival. The change came slowly, but it came with certainty. At first, the signals were small, easy to miss if you caught them one at a time, but unmistakable if you gathered them together. You know what loyalty badges are? Those red pins North Koreans wear on their chests. For decades, the badges bore the portraits of both Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il together. That was the standard had been for years. Not wearing one marked you as someone strange, so pinning it on in the morning was as automatic as eating breakfast. Your hand reached for it before you thought about it. Then one day, a badge appeared with 3 portraits. Not long after, a Kim Jong-un solo badge, at first only for special events. Then the occasions expanded. The portraits followed the same pattern. For years, every public space, every school, every agency displayed Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il side by side. That was the unwritten law. But newly constructed buildings began displaying all 3. Some agencies hung a Kim Jong-un portrait alone. Every time I looked at those portraits, something felt off. Kim Il-sung's image was old, weathered into the background of memory. Kim Jong-il's had grown familiar over the years. Both of them had already passed into history. But Kim Jong-un's portrait was different. He was a man I knew from the living present, someone making decisions somewhere right now. Hanging a living person on the wall like a figure from mythology, it felt strange. Something inside me recoiled, though I couldn't have explained exactly why. The music changed too. A song called Our Beloved Parent started being sung in agencies everywhere. At first I thought it was just a new song making the rounds. But reading the lyrics, I understood it was about following and loving Kim Jong-un the way you'd love a father. Comparing the supreme leader to a father wasn't new in North Korea. That comparison had always existed. But this time, the pitch was different. It wasn't fear they were cultivating. They wanted people to feel affection, not the cold, distant authority figure, the warm father who stays close to his children, who is always there. That was the image they were building. The shift in study materials was even more direct. The monthly political study topics began pointing in a single direction. Study the revolutionary thought of Kim Jong-un. Uphold the ideology and leadership of the esteemed supreme leader. Before, even when these phrases appeared, they came paired with Marxist-Leninist theory. The ideology led. The leader who embodied it followed. Now the order was reversing. The theory was receding. One name was stepping into the light, and everything else was moving back into shadow. I began to grasp what this shift meant. Ideology, by its nature, is bigger than any one person. Leaders come and go, ideology stays. The Soviet Union collapsed, but Marx's name didn't disappear. Systems change, but their ideological roots remain in the historical record. But when you replace ideology with a single person's name, the country becomes bound to that person, not to a set of principles. Criticizing that person isn't attacking an ideology anymore. It's a direct assault on the system itself. There's nowhere left to retreat. No margin, no gap, no room to breathe. This wasn't a personnel matter. This was an attempt to rewire how the entire country operated. To transform a nation governed by ideology into one governed by personal devotion. And it was happening one badge, one portrait, one song, one study session at a time, quietly and very fast. The moment I understood the full weight of what I was seeing, something cold ran down my spine. This country was trying to stop being a nation of ideology. It wanted to bind everything to a single name. And that single person, he was always smiling in the portraits. Around that time, I began to catch something else, quiet comparisons passing among the older officials. In North Korea, you choose your words carefully. Everyone knows that a careless sentence can become a surveillance report, and a surveillance report can destroy a life. Most people never say half of what they're actually thinking. But the oldest officials, those who had worked since Kim Il-sung's era, would, sometimes in the lowest of voices, among only the most trusted, let something slip. What they said always came back to the same thing. The supreme leader was different. By that they meant Kim Il-sung. In their memory, he was a man who, on his on-site inspection tours, would walk directly into people's homes. He would feel the blankets with his own hands to see if they were thick enough. Check the shelves for cups. Lift the pot lid to see if there was rice. I know that may not sound like much, but think about it. A teacup, a blanket. Touching them with your own hands, that's not the same as reading a report. It says, I want to know how these people actually live, not through paper, through touch. Of course, everyone knew those inspections were staged in advance. Pre-cleaned, pre-arranged, produced for the cameras. No one was naive about that. But what those older officials were holding on to wasn't whether the staging was real. It was the gesture itself. Even within the performance, the leader showed that he wanted to know how people lived. That he wanted to look. That posture had stayed with people. Some of you might remember back in the hard years after the Korean War, the village headman going door to door, checking on struggling families, connecting sick neighbors with the clinic. Whatever the formality, the idea that someone from above would come down to look that attitude, that's what those older North Koreans had felt from Kim Il-sung and remembered. And every time that memory brushed up against the present, a quiet exhale moved through the room. I listened carefully to those exhales. I couldn't ask directly, things aren't as good as they used to be, are they? That would have been dangerous. But I understood what those sighs carried. A comparison was being made, and the current leader was coming out on the losing end. People compare. It's human nature. Before was better. Now is better. North Koreans are no different. They just can't say it out loud. But what happens inside, no one can control that. I was making the same comparison. Socialist removed from the Constitution. One person's name replacing an entire ideology. Older officials quietly mourning the past. The two currents converged into a single image. When power migrates from ideology to a single individual, that's a sign the system is losing confidence in itself. A state that once leaned on ideas, finding that ideas are no longer enough, so it demands direct personal devotion instead. The memory of a leader who touched blankets with his own hands only made the absence of that more visible. When that thought snapped into focus, something cold moved slowly through my chest. Kim Jong-un's on-site inspections, they were nothing like the stories I'd heard from the older officials. An on-site inspection is when the supreme leader visits a location in person, surveys the situation, and issues directives. In North Korea, it's a major political event. The details are announced in the news, and the news itself functions as proof that the leader is working, that the system is intact. People watch it to confirm that someone up there is still at the wheel. Working in the agency, I naturally came to understand which locations were chosen for these visits. A new hospital completed, a new apartment complex finished, a new park opened, a new school built. The inspections always went to the new. The supreme leader would survey these places, expression satisfied, while people around him applauded. That scene would run on the news. Some of you have probably seen footage like that on television. Medical workers in white coats lined up to welcome him. Suited officials smiling as they escort him through the corridors. Everything spotless. The camera always finding the best angle, the most flattering face of each building. But I knew what was behind those buildings. I knew what the real residents of those new apartments were dealing with. I knew what kind of preparation went into the neighborhoods before an inspection. I knew that some residents were barred from leaving their homes for days beforehand. I knew what was happening just outside the camera's frame. There were people in the agency who knew this too. No one said it directly, but you could feel it in the atmosphere. There's one report I've never been able to forget. A new facility had been completed in a provincial area, and an inspection was scheduled. As part of the preparations, residents in old houses nearby were instructed not to open their windows facing a certain direction. The reason crumbling, impoverished homes couldn't appear in the camera frame. A report from the official handling those instructions had made its way up to our agency, and when I read that single line, something heavy settled in my chest. The distance between what was shown and what was real. Some of you may remember back in the day, when a dignitary was coming to visit, whole neighborhoods would sweep their streets and scrub their storefronts. But that was a community effort, people preparing together. North Korea's inspection preparations were different. The point wasn't to present what existed. It was to make sure what couldn't be seen stayed unseen. The supreme leader's inspections showed buildings, gleaming facades, clean corridors, neat, orderly people, new things, newly opened, newly built, and applause. But the moment the cameras turned away, everything outside that light vanished from the frame. No one's home, no crumbling alley, no poverty. None of it touched the screen. In the end, these weren't inspections at all. The leader wasn't going to see the country. He was going to be filmed bestowing favor upon it. Where once there had been a leader who touched blankets with his hands, there was now a leader who received applause in front of new buildings. And I was seeing what lay beyond those camera frames in the documents on my desk every single day. The wider that gap grew, the more something inside me shifted. Some part of me that had spent decades believing in and following this system, it was coming apart, quietly, piece by piece. Then one day, a strange directive came down to the agency. From now on, let us encourage the consumption of bread. I read it and thought I'd misunderstood. I read it again. Bread, Western-style bread, made from wheat flour. The explanation, when it came, was there had been a policy shift in agricultural direction related to wheat production, and as part of that, the goal was to guide residents toward consuming more wheat products instead of rice. Bread was one of the proposed measures. Reading it, I felt something I couldn't quite name. Think about it for a moment. What do you need in order to eat bread? You need an oven, or at least a bakery within reach. You need butter, or at the very least some kind of spread. A glass of milk would help it go down. Even for people like us, raised on rice and side dishes, bread is something you have to consciously adjust to. It doesn't happen the way rice does. You can't just set a pot on the stove and wait. And I knew, through reports and study materials and the constant low hum of information reaching us indirectly, what the kitchens of most North Korean households actually looked like at that time. Many families were struggling to put one meal together a day. Some had to think carefully before lighting their stoves. Fuel was that scarce. The crackdowns on buying grain at the Jangmadang had made even that harder. Getting a single tablet of medicine was a major undertaking. In winter, people curled under blankets in rooms too cold to heat. And the directive said, eat bread. I closed the document and sat at my desk for a long time. It wasn't just anger. Anger came too, but what arrived first was an enormous emptiness. Had the person who issued this directive genuinely not known, or had they known and issued it anyway? Either way, the result was the same. Those at the top could not see the lives of those at the bottom. Some of you may know the story from the history books, the king who, when told his people were starving, reportedly asked why they didn't simply eat meat. It's been passed down through centuries as a symbol of tragic, willful blindness. The moment I read that directive, that story surfaced in my mind. A tale from 1,000 years ago, alive and breathing in the document in my hands. The bread directive was a small example. Just one. That one told me everything. How those at the top looked down at those below. How far the leader had drifted from the actual lives of his people. Block the windows to hide the poverty. Stand in front of the new building and receive the applause. Return and issue a directive to eat bread. The country that existed in his eyes and the country I saw in those documents, they were not the same place. Socialist gone from the Constitution. A single name replacing an ideology. Inspection tours visiting only gleaming new buildings. And a directive telling hungry people to eat bread. All of it assembled itself into one picture. That night, I thought for a long time. And for the first time, quietly, I began to think about what lay beyond the borders of this country. From the day socialist vanished from that ceremony, I had been moving slowly toward a conclusion. Changing a name doesn't change people's hearts. Removing a word from the Constitution's title doesn't erase the memory of everyone who has lived under that word for decades. If anything, the attempt itself looked like evidence of anxiety. A confident system doesn't tamper with its own name. A system that starts questioning how it describes itself is a system that's already begun to waver. I'd spent decades inside this agency building a certain kind of judgment. How to read a document, how to read an atmosphere, how to read what wasn't being said. When I applied that judgment to everything I had seen, only one conclusion remained. This system is no longer running on conviction. It's running on fear. A system running on conviction puts ideology at the front. A system running on fear demands absolute personal devotion. Conviction can withstand criticism. Fear cannot. Conviction can look the reality of people's lives in the face. Fear blocks the windows, clears the camera path, and tells people to eat bread. It took me a long time to reach that conclusion. But once I got there, it didn't shake. And after it settled, I began, quietly, to think about what came next. Continuing to live inside this. Continuing to function as part of it. What that meant for me. I had a family. Aging parents. Children. When I thought of their faces, nothing about this was simple. Crossing the border meant the possibility of never seeing those faces again. Those of you who have raised children, you worry about your children before you worry about yourself. You can endure almost anything, but you want something different for your kids. That was the weight I made my decision under. The night I turned toward the border, I went back over everything in my mind. The strange silence at the Constitution Day ceremony. The word that wasn't there. The changes that arrived without explanation. The badges, the portraits, the songs, the directive to block the windows, the directive to eat bread. Every one of those things had brought me to this step. The day I first set foot on South Korean soil, I stood still for a long time. No words came. I just breathed. The cold air moved into my lungs and it felt different. The same air, but different. I can't explain it. It just was. I still miss home. The faces I left behind in the north press on me. Lying awake sometimes, I think about which hillside holds my parents' graves. Some of you carry the pain of separated families, too. That longing, I know what it is. I pray every day for the moment when unification comes and I can walk that land again. The day the Constitution's name changed, I felt for the first time that something in that country was collapsing. And in the middle of that collapse, I found something inside myself I hadn't known was there, that I had to live. Really live. That was why I crossed the border.